And some of the real heavyweight teams, Kansas City, being one of them, the bunched up NFC North, man, there are going to be some big games, like multiple big games week in and week out throughout the rest of the season. I've already pointed to Thanksgiving Day. I mean, Packers-Lions, followed by Chiefs-Cowboys. And then, look, by the time we get there, Bengals-Ravens will probably be important, super important for Baltimore. Lot of really good Sundays and weekends ahead of us. Our team, not necessarily going to be a participant in the important games. This from Dan to kind of kick off the show. Kevin, this is a lost season. Give it up. How about Ravens at 1? That's a good one, Dan, and that's a throwback. We, for many years, did a segment called Skins at 1, Redskins at 1. Every day during the show, for the show that Tommy and I did together, the Sports Fix, every day at 1 o'clock was Redskins at 1, no matter what time of year it was. And during some of those just tremendously terrible seasons, we joked, why don't we just do a Ravens at 1 segment? Because there are a lot of Ravens fans that listen to the show. No, we're not going to do Ravens at 1. And I was thinking about the first part of what you said, it being a lost season. It's definitely, we talked yesterday, fluke last year or blip this year. I'm in the category of, major blip this year. And I think the votes came in 60-40, somewhere around there. 60% said blip this year, 40% said last year was a fluke. But I'm thinking about, with Dan's note to me, I was like, is it totally a lost season? Because there is an area of the team that looks very promising. It has played pretty well. It is the part of the team that has essentially stayed the healthiest. Now, they started the season unhealthy because they didn't have their arguably best inside offensive lineman, Sam Cosmi, but they got him back after 6 weeks. But the offensive line has played well and is very promising, and we've learned something about this season. I don't think it's a lost season. Let's start with this. The Laramie Tunsil trade, based on 10 games, is a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. Nice job, Adam Peters. They're killing you for everything else. The Tunsil trade, an excellent trade. I think it's interesting about the Tunsil trade. We were all surprised because we just figured Brandon Coleman had played well enough last year in his 14, 15, 16 starts or whatever it was at left tackle that he was going to be penciled in. They nailed that pick. And then they said, not so fast. We think Brandon Coleman's okay, but we think we got to be much better. Left tackles are so hard to find. Quarterbacks, left tackles, corners that can really cover, and of course, pass rushers that demand the attention of an offensive coordinator week in and week out. Left tackle is still a very important position, especially with a right-handed quarterback. Laramie Tunsil has been superb as a pass blocker. He has been better than advertised as a run blocker. The offensive line, oh, by the way, they're going to have to pay him in the offseason. Get ready for that. The offensive line has had, since they signed Tyler Biadasz last year, good interior play. The center is solid. Tyler Biadasz is a solid top half of the league starting center. Sam Cosmi, I think you'd put him in the top third of starting guards. And Chris Paul was not a player that was put into the lineup because of an injury like every other position we've had this year. He was put into the lineup because he earned it. And he has played really good football. Now, Suter's film breakdown has dinged him the last couple of weeks, said he's not been as good as he was, but Chris Paul at left guard next to Tunsil looks promising. Connerly Jr., I'm not about to give you, a declaration 10 games into his rookie season. He's a first-round pick. There's no reason to think that he won't turn into a very good offensive tackle through 10 games. He's had some ups and downs That's the deal with draft choices in their first few years. The trajectory is not straight up. It's up and down, up and down. And then after 3, years or so, unless they cut him before, or unless they blow up as so great right from the jump. But I think, that the good from this season is that they've got a pretty good offensive line moving forward. Last year it wasn't necessarily the strong part of the team. The scheme, the quarterback made everything look great. But I think that adding Tunsil, inserting Paul into the lineup, by the way, I'd say they have depth as well with Brandon Coleman for sure. Now, Wiley and Allegretti probably not going to be a part of the mix next year. But it's not totally lost, Dan. I think that last year, what was the discussion when the season ended? Got to get bigger, stronger, and better in the trenches. Well, I think they may have accomplished that on offense. Defense, look, Kinlaw's been a top 3 performer on defense. It was an excellent addition. It just sucks that he has to play, out of position now because they've lost all their defensive ends. So he's playing, outside. He's playing a defensive end on some snaps and doesn't look as great there as he does on the inside. They still have to get better, clearly, in the defensive front, in the defensive middle, and in the defensive back. That is clearly going to be an off-season emphasis, along with they've got to find receivers for sure. But if you're asking me if it's totally lost, I would say that, through 10 games, I feel like there's an offensive line here that you can really move forward with and be confident in. The Connerly Jr., time will tell. He's had some good moments, though. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. In this season that Dan says is lost, it's a lost season, what good can you pull out of it? I'm trying to come up with other areas of good. I have one other area that I feel like there's a chance they're going to have something there in the future. I'll share that with you when we come back. Max will give you his lost season, pulling something good out of it. And I want yours at 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. Don't forget, you can watch us on our YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button when you get there. Yeah, just no, 60-40. 60-40 was the number on Blip Fluke. Somebody just sent me a note and said, you had it wrong. 60% Fluke, 40% Blip. No, it was 59.6% this year is a Blip. Last year was a Fluke, 40.4%. Those were the final totals from the Twitter poll that I put out yesterday. And yes, they are going to have to pay Tunsil. Tunsil's got 1 year left on the deal that he signed a few years ago in Houston. He takes him through 2026. And, if you're wondering, well, he's going to be a 33, 34, 35-year-old left tackle with that contract, with the new contract. Yes, that's true. Trent Williams is currently 37 years old. Currently, in terms of average annual salary, you've got Tunsil is at average annual salary. Tunsil is currently fifth in the league at $25 million. The deal he signed was a 3-year, $75 million deal in 2023 that ends in 2026. Slater just signed the most recent big deal, and that was before this season started. And then he, of course, got injured and lost for the year, but a 4-year, $114 million deal with the practical guarantees at $92 million. Yeah, I don't think they have a choice. You can't, these guys, these left tackles that are elite don't grow on trees. If you want to, hit me with, numbers that say left tackles don't age well, I'll hit you with, well, that's not a conversation that's anywhere near similar to other positions. But I think, the offensive line in this lost season that we're in the midst of, 10 games into it with still 7 left, to me, there is a positive takeaway, and it's the O-line. The Tunsil deal was a deal that's worked out in a big way. Chris Paul, the discovery of him, not by injury, but by performance, was big. Biotish has been solid all along. Cosmi, we know, has a chance to be, a top, third worst case guard in this league. And then we've got some time on Connerly Jr., for sure. And you got Brandon Coleman, who's proven to be, at the very least, versatile from a depth standpoint. We'll see what they really think of Coleman when the season ends. Because I do think there's, a possibility with all of those inactive weeks that it could be something more. But we'll find that out at the end of the season. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What can you take out of this season that you consider to be positive? Max, before I get to the phone lines, what do you got?
Yeah, a couple things. I want to just remind everybody of the Ravens game that we played in last year, where it was like Jaden's wasn't the first loss because we lost to Tampa, but it was the first big kind of loss where they showed a camera shot of Jaden Daniels sitting on the bench and he was visibly furious. So I think this season is kind of just an entire stretch of that, understanding what this, having a lost season 10 games in feels like, and not wanting to ever have to feel that again, that motivation, all of that kind of coming into that. But another part of it, I feel like will end up being a net positive at the end of the day. Last year, the defense wasn't great. It was good enough. This year, it has not been good at all. So I do think that the defensive changes going forward, I don't think Joe Witt's going to be around next year. I don't think you
that's the positive. That they were so bad that they had to make a move.
Basically, yeah, that's kind of another way you can put it. But yeah, I think a new voice defensively is going to be big for this team going forward. I mean, I was really high on this secondary coming in. I still think Mikey, he's got the highs and lows. He just needs more highs. Trey Amos has been a great addition to that secondary too. So there are a couple things here and there, but it's tough to pick out right now. You picked a good question, Kev.
I got another positive that I will get to if you guys don't hit on it. 301-230-0980. Trying to pull positives or a positive from what Dan described in his tweet to me, a lost season. And it does appear as if that's, where we're headed, to a season where like it just never even got started. And we know the reasons why. Let's start with Rylan. Rylan, go ahead.
Hey, Kev. Good morning, buddy.
Hey, Rylan. How are you?
So the only good thing, I've been better, but hey, here we are. I'd say the only good thing that could come out of this year is that it means nothing to be a commander now in that building, or it shouldn't be. I think if there's ever a chance to rebrand, it's today.
Yeah.
Like, let's get rid of that commander standard, because all that means is a tough year of injuries and continuously getting their teeth kicked in. So let's flip that script and leverage this pitiful year with at least something like the football team again.
Yeah, well, you and I would love to see that. I don't think it'll happen, but that was funny the way you said it, because there was a lot of talk about, the commander standard and he's a real commander. You got to be careful with those things when you haven't really won anything. As Snyder, I remember would say all the time, we gave him a really strong Redskin grade. What the hell does that mean? You guys have sucked for so long. You got to earn, describing your organization, and standards within your organization in ways like that. And there was some of that in the offseason. He's a real commander. We gave him a really strong commander grade. Enough. Yeah, I'm with you. Let's go to Anthony in D.C. Anthony, go ahead.
So, Kevin, the positive of this season will be that we are not who they thought we were. We are.
Okay. Why is that a positive? Why is that taking a positive out of it? Because there'll be less what?
Now they have to go back to building this thing
Presumptive?
the right way.
Uh-huh.
Now they have to go back to building it the right way. Adam Peters can't go bargain hunting at the Homeboy Shopping Network anymore. He has to find people that are going to be here for a while. So all these 1 year, one and dones, that has to be out the door. It has to be brick by brick by brick. I understand 2024 was an anomaly. They had to go for it. I give you that. But now the reality has set in.
Well, wait a minute. You just said they went bargain hunting. They've got to change that. So did they go for it, or did they go bargain shopping?
Well, they went for it with the trades, but they went bargain hunting with the free agents. That has to change. So now we have to build brick by brick and build this thing up again. I told you this before, and you weren't too keen on it. Before this roster is right, it's going to take at least 2 to 3 years, maybe even 4, because of the dearth of
I've agreed with that. I just the optimism stemmed from all of that's true, and it's going to take time to get to the point in which you have an absolute killer roster. But in the meantime, you got the most important position right, and so that gives you a chance.
Right, but check this out. So, looking at this objectively, we need 1, maybe 2 wide receivers. We need 2 defensive ends. We need 2 linebackers. We need at least 1 cornerback, and we need a safety. We're not getting that in 1 year, let alone 2 years.
We're not doing the how to fix it right now. We've got plenty of time to do that, right? We're going to be doing that together for the last few weeks of the regular season, right in to the off season. I'm just asking, is there anything positive that you can take from this lost season? And you think it's that they'll get back to building it 1 block at a time, right?
Hopefully.
Okay. Got it.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Anthony, as always. Let's go to Ian. Ian, go ahead.
Kevin, I agree with the previous caller, but to stay on topic, I think if you want to find a positive, you would point to special teams on punt return and kickoff return. I think those 2 have been a little bit above average on expectation, and I think there is some legitimate optimism heading into 2026. But if I could sidetrack the conversation and not be coachable, I think the question you need to start asking is not the blip versus fluke or what the Joe Witt conversation is more around what will change in 2026. I think there's a legitimate rumor that they might make some more coaching staff changes if Kingsbury takes a college job, etc., and they say hire Mike McDaniel or whomever. But the key question to me going forward for this franchise isn't Peters, Witt, or Kingsbury. It's really, can Jaden Daniels stop taking unnecessary hits and putting himself in position to miss games? Because you can have the greatest coaching staff, the greatest O-line, D-line, everything else around it. But if he continues this path, it's not going to end well. And my concern isn't it's an offensive coordinator issue. It's a lack of judgment by him to, like you said, on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 4, why are you taking these colossal shots that look like car crashes for no reason? And I think there's a difference between being competitive and being competitively intelligent about
I agree with that. I agree with that. But back to your, what's going to change next year? Well, let's start with the reason this year is where it is. Hopefully, they're a healthier team in 2026. That would make a massive difference. And of course, starting with Jaden Daniels, of course, because having him for half the games in a season is not going to turn out well. That's for sure. And to your point, there is not only decision-making on his end, but there's decision-making on the coaching end, right? I mean, he shouldn't have been in that game against Seattle unless he was just handing the ball off. That's one of the injuries. Agreed. And you could argue to a certain degree, I think less so, much less so, that, taking chances late in a game that was 27-10 at Lambeau wasn't necessarily the right thing to do. But I think that circumstance was not, apples to apples with the Seattle game. What else do you have?
Well, again, I think both can be true, and we've talked over this over DM. I agree that injuries have had a significant impact. Where I disagree with you is when the team was healthy, seeing them in the Giants game and the Packers game left a lot to be desired for a team that had Super Bowl aspirations. So I think this notion of just pinning it on injuries kind of lets them off.
Just pinning it is not the description. The most of the pinning of it on injuries is the description and has been the description. It's the number one reason on the pie chart of why they're 3-7. And it's by far the biggest slice of the pie chart. But I would agree with you, and I've talked about this in recent weeks. I think even if they had stayed really healthy on defense, it wouldn't have obviously looked like this, scout teamish, but it wasn't going to be a great defense. And because they were playing what turned out to be, we saw it, going into the season, but you're never sure, but it's worked out that it's been a very difficult, stretch of games that they'd have been fighting for their lives to remain in contention with that defense, even if it had remained healthy. Let me go to our guy, Bones. Bones, thanks for holding. Go ahead. Pull a positive out of this season.
Yeah, man, thanks for taking my call, Kevin, and shout out to my main man, Max, man. For me, man, we got punished by the injury bug this season, man. The injury bug hit us real bad, right? But the bright spot that I see, man, is the offensive line, as you were saying. I agree with that. You understand? The running back room and Trey Amos, man, and the special teams, Other than that, man, we got to regroup, you understand, and come back, you understand, next season, man, and do it better. Yeah, the defense side would have been a little suspect this year, right? But had it not been for the injury bug, we probably would have been a bend but don't break defense, But other than that, man, hey, I love my burgundy and gold, man. Burgundy and gold for life, man. Thanks for taking my call.
All right,
I
Bones.
love you, man. Peace.
Good call. Love you back. Paul in Centerfield. Yes, Centerville. Excuse me. That would be Northern Virginia. Fairfax County. I don't know. Is Centerville Loudoun County or
No,
Fairfax,
it's Fairfax County. Shout out.
All right, Paul in Centerville, go ahead. Pull a positive out of this season. I think a big positive, and maybe the only positive, although I've got one other written down here, is that the offensive line has real promise moving forward. The Tunsil deal was a 10 out of 10 deal for the franchise. Go ahead.
All right, Kevin. Hey, thanks, man. Yeah, and I agree with you on the offensive line, and that's part of the point that I want to try to make and get across here that I hope to get across clearly. We have the potential for a real big positive if we take advantage of this lost season to do what I believe we should really do, which is move away from this Cliff Kingsbury offense. I think the sooner we get out of this offense, the better we will get Jaden on a development track and a sustainable winning formula, and that could be a positive in this regard. So Cliff's offense is great at generating numbers, great at generating the bottom line, but the way that offense gets generated, I believe, is by asking the quarterback to play an inordinate amount of hero ball. And we saw this in Arizona. Kyler Murray was Rookie of the Year, had a couple Pro Bowl years, but it put too much on him. He blew his knee out. The wheels fell off. Cliff disappeared from the NFL for a little bit. Then he came back, and we were all curious to see what he would do. And we're basically running the exact same stuff. So we don't run the ball. Even in the running game, we're asking the quarterback to do too much with the RPOs and with the keepers. And here's where we get to the O-line. There's no reason why we can't just line up under center behind this fully healthy, talented O-line and run the ball. The reason why we don't do it is because it's not in the playbook. It's not in the scheme. It's not what we practice. But there's no reason why we couldn't and shouldn't do that, except it's not part of the offense. So if we take the lesson now and see this is not a sustainable winning formula in the NFL, make a pivot, we can get on a good track before it's too late. And I think that could be a really big positive. And I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Kev? You may not agree.
Yeah, I don't know that I totally agree with it, but I don't totally disagree with it, because my favorite offense to watch is the Shanahan-style offense. I think that has been, over the last, 15 years of NFL football, the most productive way to move the football, score points, etc. And a lot of that is with kind of under center football. But, shotgun football works too. I mean, there are plenty of high shotgun snap teams that are very successful. And I think also right now we have to, last year and what it was going to evolve into, I don't know that we have the answer to that yet. Because we've only had our starting quarterback out there for 5.5 games, and we just haven't had anything supportive of him for any meaningful amount of time. So I think Cliff is I think you're right. We're not going to get the Shanahan style under center primarily. Nobody's primarily under center, as there aren't a lot of teams that are primarily under center, but I'm with you. It's my favorite offense. I mean, when they went to hire a head coach, I was hoping, that there was a possibility of somebody that would come in and run that style of offense. But I wasn't displeased with the last year. Last year's results weren't necessarily, Paul, only about hero ball. That's just not true. He gave him a lot of easy throws. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were outstanding in the quick game. They were outstanding in the screen game. They took the shots off of play action. He threw the deep ball very well. I don't think it was, I think if you're talking, they relied on him on hero ball. They relied on him, whether it was throwing, whether it was play action, whether it was running as a scrambler. They relied on him to carry the team, no doubt, because of the supporting cast around him. But I don't think the offense was designed for Jaden to play hero ball.
And I'm mostly agreeing with you. I'll just make one last point, then I'll let you get your phone lines back if that's okay. I love the Shanahan offense. I think that's the way to go. A prior caller said Mike McDaniel. I say let's 100% go with that. But here's the thing about looking at last year. Last year, I feel like, is a bit of an aberration because Jaden was new. No one knew what to expect from Jaden Daniels in the NFL. Cliff coming back was new. No one was quite sure what to expect. And I feel like we just kind of sucker punched the league. Like they were on their heels and they didn't know, but defensive coordinators get paid too. So they got a year of film on our offense. They came back this year.
Yeah, but we haven't seen the opposing defenses play our offense. We haven't had our offense on the field this year. I mean, that's really, we can't talk about results this year when the team that they intended to field for the 2025 season hasn't really played.
I would just say even early in the year before all the quote unquote injuries happened.
Well, it started week one. I mean, Terry and Jaden have played what? One game together? Was it one game? 1.5 games? Whatever it was together? I mean, you know, the starting receivers that they intended to put on the field haven't been on the field together at all, other than the opener against the Giants. And, you know, week one, you can't, you don't want to make, you know, your living, evaluating a team season based on what they did in week one. We know that, you know, overall. All right, good call, though, Paul. I appreciate it. Yeah, my preferred offensive system has been for a long time now. The one that we got with the Shanahans, even with Jay Gruden to a certain extent, with Kevin O'Connell, etc. That's my preferred. And by the way, right from the jump, I said Jaden will work in any system, and I still believe that. I think he'd be terrific with a run-based, zone run-based, play action, bootleg, under center, you know, more than obviously he is now. I think he'd be great, you know, in Kyle's system. I think he'd be great playing for Kevin O'Connell. I think he'd be great playing for Sean McVay. But he was also great last year. Stay on hold. I still haven't given you the other positive that I've taken out of this season. 301-230-0980. Looking for what, if anything, you can pull from this lost season that's positive. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, happy Friday, everybody. Here's what's happening. We start off with Thursday Night Football last night. The Patriots get a big win over the Jets. Their 8th win in a row. A big night for Drake May, but an even bigger night for Travion Henderson, who had all 3 of the Patriots' touchdowns. They win 27-14. The Caps, they got underway last night versus the Florida Panthers. Caps jump out to a 1-0 lead off a Brandon Duhaime score, but the Panthers get one back just seconds later to tie it at 1 apiece. Then over the next 2 periods, they extend their lead to 3-1. Caps unable to play catch up as they fall 6-3 in Sunrise, Florida. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Denton's office throughout all of football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Go off of Paul's call about, kind of under center versus some of the heavy, RPO stuff that Cliff ran. I just went back and checked like the 2024 numbers. And the point here is both, work. The under center play action stuff and more of, not necessarily an RPO centric, because there's no team that's really RPO centric. But last year, the top 5 quarterbacks in terms of RPO attempts were Jaden Daniels, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. I would say that those are certainly among last year's top 5 out of the top 6 or 7 QBs in the game. Now, the top 3 play action quarterbacks who were much more under center than these other quarterbacks were Jared Goff, Matt Stafford, and Sam Darnold. Also worked very well. So far, by the way, Mahomes, Nix, and Daniel Jones are the top 3 RPO quarterbacks in 2025. There are lots of different ways to be productive offensively. I prefer the under center, run the ball, play action, boot, easy throws, easy windows off of play action when you're running the ball well, like we see with Goff, like we see with Stafford, like we see with Darnold, or last year anyway, like we've seen, for someone like me who's followed his career, even post here, Kirk Cousins under center play action is where he was, an A-plus quarterback, which is why a lot of people wondered why so much pistol and not nearly the level of under center in Atlanta with Zach Robinson, who, by the way, came from Sean McVay, which was weird. McVay runs a ton of pistol, by the way. The Rams are in the pistol at a high level, percentage-wise. All right, pulling positives from a lost season. Back to our focus and our topic. Lost season, Dan says, time to move on. And I said, yeah, not so fast. There is a major positive to be pulled from this season through 10 games anyway. Of course, we'll probably lose 3 of these players over the next few weeks to injury. But the offensive line, which has been the healthiest unit this year, has performed pretty well. And the Tunsil trade, 10 out of 10. He has been outstanding. You're going to have to pay him as well. The discovery of Chris Paul, he's played at a high level. Biotish, already a good player. Cosmi, already a good player. They have a really positive offensive line situation moving forward. And the top 2 priorities last year, get better on defense, especially up front, and get bigger and stronger and better in the trenches on offense to protect your number 1 asset, your quarterback. I think they've accomplished that this year. Connerly Jr., work in progress. We shall see. I do have one other thing that I'm going to mention, but I'm going to wait to see if anybody else does it first. Tim in Connecticut's been on hold for a while. Tim, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call, Kevin.
Sure, Tim.
I've got 2. One is the special teams. I think
they were great last year,
fabulous.
Right? Their kick and punt coverage were great last year too.
True, but when you compare this year's team to last year's team, offense isn't cutting it for me. Defense didn't either. Injuries impacting, of course, but through all that, Izzo has delivered. Need a new kicker, but I can deal with that. The other silver lining to the season is that if we continue to lose, we're going to get that difference-making defender at the top of the first round, and that could help the team. So I like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess we are approaching that point in which we'll start discussing in a few weeks. Do you want them to win or lose for draft purposes? It's different for me. Let me just give you a heads up on the conversations to come. It's different for me now that they have a quarterback. The years in which at the end of the season I was rooting for them to lose. Remember the season where they played the Giants late in the year. Now, that was for the number 2 overall selection in Chase Young. Turned out, didn't really pay off. but I didn't want them to win the game. What was the point? And then, in other years, it's like, like the year in 2023, my God, please, Greg Zuerlein, make this field goal. We have to take advantage of being in this draft with all of these quarterbacks that people are very excited about. When you have the quarterback, which they do, for me, not like there's a lot of carryover, one year to another, but if we get into December and they've got a chance to have a really high draft pick, but Terry's back on the field, Jaden's back on the field, other offensive players, are on the field. I want to see them play well. We'll get to that when we get to that. Yeah. Thanks.
I like to play well, but hello?
Yeah. Let me get to another call. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Let's go to Lap. Lap, my guy. Go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kevin? Shout out to Max. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
The positive is definitely the offensive line. I do like Trey Amos. I want to see Lang and Bill Crosby get some good games, coming up, man. I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Well, they're getting more than expected opportunities. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you, man. And this is what I had said before. I said I think a Kyle Shanahan offense would have been better. I was surprised because Quinn.
I didn't say better. I said that would have been my preference.
Well,
they were pretty good in the Cliff Kingsbury offense last year. They were top 5 offense in the NFL per DVOA.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and then the other caller was saying about how Cliff did with Kyler Murray. It's the same kind of thing, but we were effective last year. But I still believe that we would have been a better team with a Kyle Shanahan offense. That's just
they could have hired a guy like Bobby Slowick. Wasn't he available? I forget who the other possibilities were. Look, Kingsbury was very, very sought after. I mean, he had multiple offers and was about to take the Raiders job. But when Quinn got the job, they were aggressive going after him, and he wanted the opportunity to come here and work with Quinn because he knew Quinn, loved Quinn, had heard about working with Quinn. That's why they got a lot of the assistants that they got. Let's go to Aveen. Aveen, go ahead. What's the positive you can pull from this season?
Hey, Kevin, I'll say the rookie class has been a bright spot.
Whoa!
I think
Whoa! Are you sure you want to say that?
Yeah,
You've just triggered a lot of people that think, once again, Adam Peters is over on the draft. But go ahead. I'll let you finish.
It is early. People need perspective, but I think Conley's held his own. You see so many tackles, rookie tackles, especially even first-round tackles, be absolute disasters their rookie season. I mean, you can look at the Chiefs and Cowboys last year drafting Guyton and Sutamatia, and those guys couldn't even get on the field for them. So I think Conley's held his own. Amos has arguably been our best secondary player. With Lane, we at least have a really good return specialist. But I think I've seen some impressive catches for him where I think maybe he can even be like a wide receiver 3 or 4, good wide receiver 3 or 4 for us down the future. And then I still like Krosky Merritt. I just think teams are keying in on the run against us now and stacking the box with our receiver situation.
Right.
So I'll say rookie class. But I just want to end with this, Kevin. Maybe I'm just desperate, but I still view this season as not being, totally irrelevant. If we can somehow find a way to win this Miami game, you never know which version of Miami you're going to get. I'm just really praying we can get Jaden, Terry, and maybe Noah back around for that Broncos game, because those next 3 games are against really struggling offenses and struggling quarterbacks.
Oh, you're not doing this, are you? Are you doing a me here? Are you doing what I usually do? You're stealing my act here.
But those offenses are bad. Broncos are really struggling. Bo Nix is a really bad
but that Bronco defense will be the best they faced all season.
But that's why we have Jaden Daniels. I mean, that's what I'm hoping.
Maybe back for that one. Offenses. You might want to not bring him back against that defense if you don't have receivers.
He can throw 5 touchdowns on the Eagles defense. He can play well against the Broncos defense.
Yeah.
But those 3 games, bad offenses, and I'm just hoping. I still see a situation where we're 7-7 in December on that Saturday game against the Eagles. So I haven't given up till hell.
Woo! Aveen, have you watched our defense?
I know, but that's why you have Jaden Daniels.
But you don't have Jaden Daniels for the next two. More likely than not. I can't say Denver for sure, but you don't have him Sunday. Look, Mariota gives you a chance on offense. Marcus Mariota gives you a legitimate chance to play well offensively against by far and away the worst defensive team they have faced. I love the way you put it. It's not exactly the way I put it for my keys to a win, but there have been some real bad Miami performances this year, and you kind of need them to have one of those bad Miami performances. But, the bad performances from them, the Cleveland game was against an all-world defense. Let's not forget that. And wasn't it like, 30-mile-an-hour winds or something that day or something in Cleveland, I think? I don't know. And even Carolina, a good defense. All right. Thank you, Aveen. I appreciate that. 7-7. Can you imagine if the season turned like that and you're 7-7 going into that first Philly game? Yeah, I can't get there. I try all of these years when they have had bad seasons, I've tried to get there. I stopped doing it, if you recall, towards the end of the Snyder regime because I knew it wasn't possible. But I can't get there here because they are just so horrifically terrible on defense. This offense on Sunday, the Dolphins offense, do you know how much speed they have? Who the hell is going to tackle Achane in space or Waddle? How about Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison coming up in a few weeks? Yeah, I just can't get there on that. Look, there's still a few of you on hold, so we'll do a couple more calls on this, and I'm going to give you the other positive for me from this lost season, or at least lost through 10 games. Maybe Aveen will be right. I hope he is, man. That would be awesome. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Here's the other positive from this season that I'm pulling. Offensive line really is number one by far. It's stayed the healthiest. Tunsil was an absolute, great move by the organization. They're going to have to pay him, and there will be some debate as to, are you going to pay him a top level left tackle salary, maybe the highest in NFL history. Slater's 4-year, $114 million deal in this last offseason is the highest of all time. When you're going to be paying him for his ages 33, 34, and 35 season if you do a 4-year extension. That will be something that they'll have to weigh, but that's a position I think you can do that a hell of a lot more safely than you can other positions. But the other takeaway for me, I really thought, and I think that Dorrance Armstrong is a really good player. We saw it last year, it came along slowly, and then it really ended up being a great end of the season and a great postseason. They have really missed Armstrong. I think they've missed Armstrong and Wise. You other than quarterback, obviously, and Terry, I think Armstrong and Wise being decimated at that position really ruined them defensively. Again, I want to be clear. I feel now, before the season, I said biggest mystery. Many of you were very bullish on their corners, their secondary, that it was going to all come together. The thing that we debated the most, was the Kinlaw deal. Thought it was too much. That turned out to be a pretty good deal. He's been worth it here, at least in the first year. But Dorrance Armstrong, he's not a game plan for defensive player, but he's an excellent defensive end, and he's incredibly versatile. He can rush the passer. He can stop the run. We saw him effective dropping into coverage. He's just 28 years old. Yes, severely injured, lost for the year, but hopefully, he's back next year. He does have 1 year left. He was one of the, year one deals of the Adam Peters regime, Quinn, their year one, that he got a 3-year deal like Louvu. Eckler as well, right? Or Eckler's was 2 years. I think Eckler's was 2 years. I think Armstrong's really good. I also think another find has been Jacob Martin. Like, if they, Suter pointed this out, he's like, their defense had Armstrong, Wise stayed healthy, with Martin as the rotational guy. With Kinlaw, he doesn't like Payne at all, but with Kinlaw inside for sure, and then working Newton into it, that it would have been a formidable front, not with a game-wrecking player or a game-wrecking pass rusher. That's for sure. Even against those wounded teams, the Giants, early on in the season, the Giants, Raiders, and even the Chargers, where they really did play well defensively, they wouldn't be playing well defensively right now against those teams without the players they had in those games. Even as bad as the Giants, well, first of all, the Giants morphed into a better team altogether with Jackson Dart, and Washington played an absolute inept Russell Wilson, but it was also because they were behind, a wounded offensive line. No Andrew Thomas in that game, their best offensive lineman. But remember, in that game, they had, pressures, they had sacks, they had disruptions. Russell Wilson was like, 48% completion percentage, something like that in the game. They stopped the run. There was a lot. And then the same with the Raider game. And then, although they gave up some chunk, yards in the air, which was a concern after the Green Bay game, remember. And then, the Charger game was, yes, there was some easy pitch and catch, but up front, they did a pretty good job. So I think that one positive is that Dorrance Armstrong, the emergence of Jacob Martin as a rotational player, Dietrich Wise is not under contract. He was a 1-year deal. And at his age, I don't know if they'll bring him back. They got to go find more, on the edge. By the way, this is going to be a key on Sunday, man. This could be a bloodbath with, Devon, A-Chain on the edge. This could look like Gibbs last week. which has got me very concerned about Sunday morning. But that's something to pull as a positive, that I think they would have been certainly a better run-stopping team had they not lost their 3 defensive ends. By the way, John Baptiste was really starting to come on as a player for them. They were big fans of John Baptiste. All right, we'll take a couple of more calls on this. 301-230-0980. The positive that you'd pull out of this lost season. Billy, go ahead.
Kevin, I mean, this is the second segment this week here. You got me upside down. What are we doing?
What do you mean?
We're going to beat the Dolphins. We're going to have a week off. Quinn's back in command on the defense. We still have the unicorn. We still have JD5. 2 weeks for the Broncos game. That's at home. You're going to beat the Vikings. You're going to beat the Giants. I'm on the Aveen bandwagon. Let's go out and have ourselves a half a season.
Let's go have ourselves a half a season. Look, I would look forward to seeing a relatively healthy offense out there and see what it looks like over, say, the final 5 games. But I don't know if it's going to be the final 6. I don't know if they'll be back for the Denver game. And that would be a terrible game to bring them back for.
6:30 a.m. start. Let's go.
All right. See ya. You'll be started early Sunday morning, just continuing from Saturday night. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the defenses Washington's faced this year, right? So let's go to DVOA right now, defensive ranked teams. So Denver's number 2 in the league behind Houston. So they've got them coming up. Seattle's 3. They just faced them 2 weeks ago. Detroit's 5. They faced them this past week. Green Bay's 8. They played them in week 2. By the way, Atlanta's 9. They faced them. The Chargers are 11. Philly, by the way, right now 13, but rising. I think they're going to catch KC, by the way, 14. The defensive teams that they have faced this year, forget about the offensive teams, which have been mismatches with our defense. They have faced over the last 3 weeks, and, throw Denver in there in a couple of weeks. The good news is this will be one of the worst defensive teams left on their schedule. Actually, the worst defensive team. No, Dallas. Dallas will still be, but more likely than not when they get there. So there's an opportunity offensively on Sunday to succeed, I think. All right, there's one more caller. It's Mark in Largo. Okay, Mark, be coachable. What's the positive you would pull from this 10-game lost season so far?
The toughness of Jaden Daniels. I would say the toughness of Jaden Daniels. Yes, he does get injured, but he comes back. He keeps coming back. He's not going to quit on his team. He's not going to quit in this area. And that's the one thing I will give him a lot of credit for. I think if that kid wanted, I think if he could, he would have played last Sunday.
I like that. I agree. He's a tough SOB, no doubt.
He's a tough SOB. And I just think, Kevin, I do think if he comes back when they play Denver, I think that's a 50-50 game because Bo Nix is not – I mean, he's having a worse slump than Jaden is. And Jaden's been hurt. And Bo's been playing. I mean, I think that's a game that Dan – I do agree with the last caller, even though he was a little bit off. I do think Dan calling the defense, no one knows what they're going to do. No one. No one knows what Dan is going to do. He could pull a Greg Williams. He could. We don't know that. And I just think that if this team can somehow win on Sunday and beat Denver and then ride it out with Jaden, and you know what, Kevin?
What?
Even if they don't make the playoffs, even if they don't make it at 10-7 or 9-8, or they go to 8-9, I'm good with that. You know why? Kevin, you and I, we go back to the 80s with Gibbs. And we always had a year where he didn't do well, but he finished strong. Then the next year he made the playoffs, 85 and 89. They
were 10-6 in those seasons, remember?
They were 10-6, right. They were 10-6, just missed it. But they made the playoffs a year later and then proceeded by winning the Super Bowl a year after that. It comes in parables for this team, okay? And granted, I think he is. If Jaden is out there, this team is so emotional, and he's playing like he's playing. It's going to make everybody else play better. I just think they.
I love your parable positioning every time you call. Now you are instructive, and we're all taking notes. It's good. It's a good job. This is one of your better calls recently. I like the way you went with Jaden's toughness. Let me just say, in all seriousness, Mark. Leading up to the draft, that LSU 2023 season was so much fun to watch. I mean, the dude was just unbelievable.
Oh my God!
But the game in which it was so clear how tough he was. They played at Missouri, middle of the season. They're losing the game, and he is banged up. I mean, he's taking an absolute pounding. He left the game briefly. Right. He comes back into the game. And he ends up, rushing for $150, throwing for 300, and they come back. And I know the final score right now without even looking it up. I'm pretty sure 49-39 was what they won by on the road against a good Missouri team, a good defensive team. You know who was great that day was Luther Burden. Luther Burden's playing really well in Chicago.
Wouldn't he be good down here if we have? And that brings us to another thing. And I'm giving some compliments here. Adam Peters getting Treylon Burks, that could be a steal. I still think they should get Brian Thomas, and they still may.
They didn't have many choices. He was on the street.
Treylon Burks, I get what you're saying, but Treylon Burks could be a steal. And I also think they still may get Brian Thomas, even though you're totally against it. They still may. I
didn't say I was totally against it. I said there would be a massive red flag around it, which is why nobody apparently wanted to trade for him, even though he was available at the deadline. All right, I got to run. Thanks. I did just pull up that LSU-Missouri box score. So Garrett Nussmeier came in when Jaden got hurt. Jaden was 15 of 21 for 259, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 15 carries, 130 yards in the game. They came from behind. They scored 32 in the second half and beat Missouri 49-39. He was such a badass that day. By the way, how about this receiving crew? Malik Neighbors, 6 for 146. Brian Thomas Jr., 4 for 66. Mason Taylor, 4 for 27. I was right about Luther Burden. Luther Burden that day, 11 catches for 149 yards. He's played well the last few weeks, right? Am I right about that? In Chicago? Isn't Luther Burden getting like more snaps and more targets?
He's been flashing throughout the season for sure.
Yeah. Because he had a good game. Didn't he have a good game against us? He did.
Yeah, he had like one big catch that went for
Luther Burden, who I loved coming out. He went in the second round. There were some character, I think, concerns. Against Dallas, 3 catches for 101 yards. I didn't remember that. Against us, 4 catches, 51 yards. And against the Giants in the comeback win in the snow the other day, 3 catches, 51 yards. He's tough as nails, man, that kid. All right. Keys to a win over the Dolphins when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
In looking at the practice this week, the connections, have you seen that mend even more as far as develop, establish? And then in practice, have you seen the dots connect even more this week?
I liked it a lot today in terms of the practice. It was our most speed of the week. We called on that last night to make sure, hey, this has to be part of our practice. This has to be there. I like that the guys connected this week. Obviously, doing their thing on their own dinners and that, like the coaches were not involved with that, but their time together and also some of their families here too. That's a big deal. So what I wanted to see by today was this, and communication, the speed, the execution. And that's what I was, shooting for today. And so that's got to carry through into Sunday as we get, kind of the final preparations over the next day.
Dan Quinn earlier today over in Madrid, taking over the defense, and the defense is still majorly depleted. And, add Trey Amos to the list, of course, after he got injured and knocked out for the rest of the year in the game against Detroit on Sunday. Miami's a 2.5-point favorite in this game. The Dolphins right now are a 3-7 football team, but in recent weeks, they went to Atlanta and destroyed the Falcons. Against Baltimore 4 nights later on Thursday Night Football in Lamar's return. They lost the game 28-6, but they actually really moved the football in the first half against Baltimore in particular. But they self-destructed. They ended up with 3 turnovers in the game that were crucial. They were 0 for 3 in the red zone with, I think, 2 of those 3 turnovers in the red zone. Then last week, as you know, as a big underdog at home against Buffalo, they beat the Bills 30-13. That was off Buffalo beating Kansas City the week before. They rushed for 200 yards. I mean, put it this way. They beat Buffalo in a game in which they turned the ball over 2 times. And they weren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. They weren't very good on third down. But Buffalo really hurt themselves. They turned it over 3 times in the game, including on an unbelievable, if you haven't seen that highlight from last week, Josh Allen takes off on a long run and is carrying guys, but at the very end of the run, in which he, I guess, might run out of gas or might get pulled down by 3 defenders, they knocked the ball out of his hands. He fumbled, and that was pretty much it. So, look, this is far different than the last 2 Fridays when I've come in here and I've said about Seattle and Detroit, like this is not a good matchup. The Seattle matchup in particular was a terrible matchup for them. The Detroit matchup wasn't great, clearly. Look, they've had a run here, right, of, Chiefs, Seahawks, Lions. I mean, that's, you're talking about 3 of arguably the top 5 or 6 teams in the league. And they are really good on both sides of the ball. That's the thing. They're excellent defensively. Seattle, Detroit, and Kansas City are. Seattle and Detroit. And then explosive on offense, playing against a really hurt football team. So, the worst of the injuries coincided with the worst part of the schedule, at least as of now. They do have to play, Philly twice. And they've got, the second best defense in the league in Denver's behind Houston's best defense in the league per DVOA. So let's start with this. Washington pulls off the win Sunday in Madrid against the Dolphins. If they play a great game offensively, there is no margin for error with the defense that they're putting out on the field. And Miami is much better offensively than they are defensively. Offensively, they've got to be clean. Like, they played their cleanest game of the year against Detroit, right? No penalties, no turnovers, no drops, really. The one back shoulder to Robbie Chosen was iffy in terms of catchable. It was a good ball, but it was well defended as well. This has to be a game in which every drive is to win the game. You can't punt in this game more than twice. You can't turn the ball over on offense. You can't have drive-killing penalties on offense. Miami's the easiest defensive team they have faced in weeks. When you compare it to what I just went through, Kansas City, Seattle, and Detroit, it'll be easier up front. It will be slightly easier for receivers. They don't have receivers that are getting open. Clearly, we know that. That's a major problem. It allows defenses to play Washington differently than they play almost any team in the league right now. Steve Suter pointed out that in cover 3, the deep free safety in cover 3 was actually robbing down below the intermediate routes because there was no fear that anybody was going to beat him on a deep post to an empty, middle of the field. So they're playing Washington differently because of their receiver situation, and there's no real threat. There's no real separation threat. We did see it with Burks a little bit last week, but he's not going to play. He's done with finger surgery after last week. Would have been nice to have Burks to see his development the rest of the way. Maybe they did find something with the former first-round pick. He played well last week. It was probably the best receiver performance we've seen in weeks. But Miami isn't what the last 3 teams have been defensively. So Washington's offense has to win the game. We're going to say this every week. We've been saying it. But this is a chance Sunday to possess the football, to run the football, to throw the football. They can do these things against the Miami defense. They have to be better on third down. Third down was a major problem against Detroit because they did some good things offensively. And I think with what they'll put out there, and the best part is you've got a really good, capable backup quarterback who can play as a starter in this system in particular. Mariota's not the concern here on Sunday. The concern is, can they get themselves into situations where they can stay on the field? They have to convert on third downs and stay on the field. It'll be another game. We've talked about this a lot recently where they're going to be a 4-down team, not from their own 19 on 4th and 8, but from their own 29 on 4th and 1, like 2 weeks ago against Seattle when Zach Ertz, false started on a play that was going to be a 15 to 20-yard play. So they're going to be a 4-down team. They hopefully will not be in a lot of 4 downs because they're successful on third down. Offense, third down, 1 and 2 in terms of beating Miami. Number 3 is, let's go to the other side of the ball. Miami's good on offense. They're not great on offense. They're not Detroit. They're not Seattle. They're not, Mahomes and company. They're not even Dallas. But they've got so much team speed, guys. I'm sure you know this. Waddle is a separator, an immediate separator. Devon Achane right now, 4th in the league in rushing. He had 174 yards last week, 174 against the Buffalo Bills on a day in which they just ran over that Bills defense. The Bills defense isn't great. Obviously, it's not Washington. Achane was 22 for 174. He averaged 7.9 yards per carry, had 2 touchdowns. He also had 6 catches for 51 yards. Waddle, 5 catches for 84 yards. I just don't see how they're going to stop Miami especially the run. Like, there's too much speed and there's too much. It's another Shanahan style system. Quinn has really struggled with those. They're going to run outside zone, and who's going to set the edge? Jacob Martin can do it with effort. Got to start him. Got to play him a lot. But, I mean, number 28, I could see easily going for $150 Sunday. If you keep him under 110, I mean, what's Achane's number over-under number for rushing yards Sunday? Look that up for me,
pulling it up.
Max. I should have looked that up before. It's got to be, I mean, I know that, it's not going to be 150. Those aren't the numbers, but it's going to be a high number. They've got to keep him to like $110 or fewer, and like 4.5 per carry.
79.5 is his over-under on rushing.
Yeah, that's a high number for a back, for a prop bet. I by the way, it's not high enough for me.
His rushing receiving is 121.5. That's a lot.
Yeah. Somehow you've got to set the edge, and you've got to keep him to 4.5 yards per carry, not 8 yards per carry. Gibbs last week at 9.5 yards per carry. I don't think this is possible. It's on my list of keys to a win. I don't think it's possible that defensively they can actually stop Miami's run game in particular. I think the way to stop Miami's offense is you've got to go get Tua. You have got to get him off his spot. Tua has games in which you're like, huh? Is he even an NFL starter? He's shorter, so you get tip balls against Tua. You got to have a tip ball that ends up in the hands of, Antonio. What's the corner's name that's playing for us?
Antonio Hamilton.
Antonio Hamilton. You've got to get a tip ball that ends up in Jordan McGee's hands. You got to go get Tua, period. Because, and by the way, the ball's out quickly, but you got to go get him so that you can disrupt. You can make the picture less clear. You can get hands in the passing lanes. And really, that's probably more or less what they should do. Hands up in the passing lanes. You're probably not going to get them because you're not very good at that. But you've got to disrupt Tua and have him end up with a game in which, they turn it over a lot. And that leads me to this. They're number one in the league in lost, turnovers. 17 of them, worst in the league. They turn the ball over. It's something they do. You've got to be +2 or better. We're talking about the Dolphins. I understand that. But you got to be +2 on Sunday. It's got to be, and by the way, I don't think you're stepping in front of picks. I don't think you're reading things well. I think it's, Tua making a terrible throw that you have to catch, or Tua having a ball tipped at the line of scrimmage that somebody comes up with. That's what's got to happen Sunday for them to win the game. And then lastly, Aveen said it, you've got to hope for one of those Miami, implosion games. They are definitely capable of that. They did it against Cleveland a few weeks ago. Cleveland's terrible, but Cleveland is great on defense. And they just completely disrupted Tua. Tua's QBR against the Browns a few weeks ago was 3.6. He threw 3 picks and threw for 100 yards. My God, how good is Cleveland's defense? If they had any offense, any. But we don't have Myles Garrett. We don't have Grant Delpit. We don't have Denzel Ward. We don't have Mason Graham. We don't have the rookie from UCLA who's playing so well, Schlesinger, the number 49 dude for them. But Miami's capable of stinking the joint out, and Tua is capable of that, and you need one of those games. I don't feel good about this game, but I don't feel terrible about it. So I'll hold off on my prediction for later on in the show. But offense has to be the key the rest of the way, man. You're playing teams after Denver anyway, and before Philly, that you have, well, Minnesota's good on defense. What are we talking about? I mean, they're going to come after everybody. But offense is your only shot because you are truly, truly a terrible, terrible defense with no hope, player-wise, of being much better than you've been. Maybe Quinn makes a difference. I can't imagine it's going to be a massive difference. But it's not a bad game to take over the responsibilities in against the Dolphins because it's not a great game to take over the responsibilities, but it's probably a little bit better than the Lions, Seahawks, and Chiefs. All right, smell test picks next.
All right, happy Friday, everybody. Here's what's happening. We will start off with Thursday Night Football. The Patriots get a win over the Jets. Their 8th win in a row, and big night for Drake May, but an even bigger night for Travion Henderson, who had all 3 of the Patriots' touchdowns. They win 27-14. The Caps, they got underway last night versus the Florida Panthers. They jumped out to a 1-0 lead off a Brandon Duhaime score, but the Panthers get one back just seconds later to tie it at 1 apiece. And then over the next 2 periods, Panthers extend their lead to 3-1, and the Caps unable to play catch up as they fall 6-3 in Sunrise, Florida. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Den's office throughout all of football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
This from Lenny. Lenny writes, "Thanks for nothing. I played your Washington pick, and it was a, in all caps, big loser." You're welcome, Lenny. 76-45. And now, what is it on the year? Whatever it is. I had it here a moment ago. Something absurd. 76-45 and 8 on the year now. So, sorry. I just keep providing winners week in and week out. Not one losing week the entire season. Off last week's 9-1. You're welcome, Lenny. 6-4-2 last week. Man, the Colorado game was the painful one. Auburn too. I pushed Auburn. Some of you won with Auburn, and some of you probably pushed with Colorado. I gave it out at 6.5 because it was just sitting there at 6 and 6.5 all week, so I didn't feel right buying the half point without a lot of 6.5s or 7s out there. But that one was certainly doable for Dion and his bunch. I did not do, a clock management segment this week. Dion is completely clueless. He may be the worst at doing this of any coach at any level. So late in the game, they were down by 10. Late in the game, you're down by 10. What do you need? Typically, what you need something called a field goal and something else called a touchdown. That's usually how you get to 10 in this league. There are other ways to get to 10, a touchdown, 2-point conversion, and a safety. But the way it typically happens is a touchdown and a field goal. So at the end of the game, he's got 3 timeouts left, and it's 4th down and 8. Now, I'm getting 6.5. I'm hoping Dion will mess up and go for it on 4th down 27-17. I'm thinking he might just be, it was 29-19, 29-9. He might just be clueless enough to keep the offense out there and throw one into the end zone. Because I'm not going to cover getting 6.5 if they kick the field goal to cut it to 7. By the way, personally, I did buy the half point and played it to 7, but smell test wise, it was 6.5. So he's got the offense out on the field on 4th and 8, Max. 3 timeouts left, needing 10 points. And then somebody yells to him behind him, "You got to kick the field goal." Oh, no. And he turns around and then he panics and he calls a timeout. So he burns one of the timeouts to put the field goal team out there instead of just putting the field goal team out there. So they made the field goal, and then they had to kick an onside kick instead of kicking deep and hopefully getting a stop with 3 timeouts. He is the worst at this. The worst. I'm not giving Colorado out. All right, last week, 6-4-2. Let's get to this week. It starts tonight. I've got a Friday night game. Last week, I had a Friday night game. I'll tell you, I don't think I mentioned this yesterday. I've got people that will, can vouch for me. And I think I said this to you, actually, Max, whether it was on the air or off the air. Old Dominion was the play last night. I didn't give it out because there was sharp action split, but they rolled Troy, and the line was just not right. But anyway, let's get to the games that matter. So we'll start with tonight. Clemson's at Louisville catching 3. Clemson's had a terrible season. They're 4-5. Louisville at 7-2. They lost last week to Cal in overtime. By the way, Louisville's got in the ACC an overtime loss to Virginia 30-27 and an overtime loss to Cal 29-26. They are at home tonight playing a Clemson team that did beat Florida State last week after losing 2 in a row to Duke and SMU. But Clemson's playing better. The public really likes Louisville. They think the number is too short. They were an 18.5-point favorite last week, a 10-point favorite the week before, 26 before that. They've been getting a lot of respect, and now we see a low number. Don't think of Clemson the way you typically think of Clemson. Clemson's not a good team this year. I'm going to take Clemson on the road tonight, +3 at Louisville. Let's go to Saturday, one of the 2 biggest games of the day, Oklahoma in Tuscaloosa, to face Bama. Bama's one of the biggest public plays of the weekend. Nobody believes in Oklahoma. I get why. Their quarterback, Mateer, has not played well really since coming back from the injury. He's a bit of a, gamer and a bit of a guy that plays off schedule. That's his best thing. He's not a pocket passer, but I'm telling you right now, Oklahoma is so good on defense. Bama, has struggled to run the football, this year. And if they struggle to run the football on Saturday, I think that Oklahoma can win this game outright. The number's under a touchdown. It's one of the biggest public plays of the weekend. The Tide are at home. I'll take Oklahoma on the road plus the 6. Texas State is getting 3 on the road at Southern Miss. Southern Miss is 7-2. Texas State is a 3-6 football team. But the thing about Texas State is they can really score. They have lost, by the way, 5 games in a row, and they haven't covered in their last 7. Meantime, Southern Miss has won 5 in a row, and yet the line is just 3. I'll take Texas State plus the 3 at Southern Miss. And then BYU got hammered by Texas Tech last week. But TCU lost as well. This is a weird line. I think it's a very short line. It was one of those right when I saw it, I'm like, I'm definitely going to be on the underdog here. TCU lost a close one to Iowa State last week. BYU got handled for their first loss of the year. They are laying the numbers now down to 4. I see some 3.5s. I'll take TCU plus 4 against BYU on late Saturday night. Let's go to Sunday, and we'll start with Madrid. Public loves Miami. Numbers, they're all over the I see some 2.5s. I see some 3s. I even see a 3.5 right now. I'll take Washington plus the 3 Sunday in Madrid. Sorry, Lenny. I'm giving Washington out again. I don't know how they'll do it. I don't feel great about it, but it's going to be a major need for most sports books. Jacksonville's getting 3 at home against the Chargers. The Jags, blew that big lead, lost last week to Houston. They've lost 3 of their last 4. The Chargers have quietly sort of won 3 in a row and looked impressive doing it. I mean, their defense has really stepped up since the Indianapolis game. They were awesome against Minnesota. They were awesome against Pittsburgh on Sunday night. They're going, west to east, early start. I'll take the Jags at home plus 3. I think the game that I like more than any other this weekend is Arizona off their absolute, one-sided, blowout loss to Seattle last week. They were down 35-0 early in the second quarter. They lost 44-22. The 49ers lost, against the Rams. The 49ers are definitely flawed right now. The injuries defensively are a big problem for them. They're healthier on offense. San Francisco's a mere 3-point favorite on the road at Arizona. I'll take the Cardinals plus the 3. And then the Browns are getting 8 at home against the Ravens. There's a lot of sharp money, believe it or not, on Cleveland. I think that people realize that Baltimore is flawed in a lot of areas. They have won 2 in a row since Lamar came back. They won the game in Minnesota. I'll take the Browns plus the 8. The Browns have been more competitive recently. They got blown out by the Patriots, but that game was a game in the first half. Huge public side is Baltimore. Sharp money on Cleveland. There you go. Clemson tonight plus 3. Oklahoma plus 6. Texas State plus 3. TCU plus 4. And then the Skins plus 3. The Jags plus 3. The Cardinals plus 3 and the Browns plus 8. So what is that total? 8 plays this weekend, hitting at 63% on the season. All right, Ben Standing next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. Watch us on our YouTube channel. It's the ESPN, the Team 980, YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button when you get there. Also, Window Nation wants you to know that their year-end sale is in play right now. That's 50% off all window styles. All right, 50% off all window styles, and the choice, if you decide to finance the purchase, to pay no interest for 5 years. Yeah, 0% interest for 5 years. The price includes professional one-day installation. When I say professional, Window Nation, #1 rated window installation company by Forbes magazine. Window Nation's proven quality windows are so good, you'll actually save money with lower utility bills each month. Window Nation has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. They're offering a lifetime warranty on all of their windows. Don't wait. This sale ends at the end of this month, right after Thanksgiving. Schedule your free in-home estimate right now by going to windownation.com or calling them at 866-90-NATION. 50% off all windows in all window styles, 0% financing until the year 2030, and a guaranteed professional one day they're in and out of your home installation. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com.
What was that like for you? And just nothing more than that.
No, I've been in this business long enough, and at the end of the day, it's about winning and about producing. And we've yet to do that this year, and so it wasn't necessarily anything that I was necessarily shocked by. We're here to win. So no different than if you move a player in and out. Sometimes that happens in coaching. So.
That was Joe Witt Jr. earlier today. He didn't hold the weekly coordinator press conference like Cliff did yesterday because he's not the defensive coordinator anymore. But he's been around for a long time. He understands that, the resume, when it looks the way it does, there is certainly the possibility that it won't work out for him. There will be, one of the things we've got to add to the list of the many things we will be talking about towards the end of this season, more likely than not, unless Aveen is right and they're 7-7 going into the final 3 games, is the defensive coordinator hire. And who knows, they might be in the market for an offensive coordinator if Cliff gets, a college job or a pro job. Who knows? Real quickly, I do want you to know that if you've been having any HVAC system issues, Foley Mechanical is where you should go. We had some issues 6 months ago. I called Dan Foley himself. He came out himself, took care of everything. He owns 100% of the company. It's not a franchise, not some big private equity firm that owns it. He controls the quality from the equipment to the people he hires. You'll really like Dan a lot. Such a quality guy with a team that's professional, skilled, and sharp. Foley Mechanical is full service, heating, air conditioning, hot water, boilers. They are the go-to for older homes with radiator heat, a real specialty. They work across D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, and they proudly install Amana HVAC equipment. If you're having any issues with your HVAC system, call Foley Mechanical or go to FoleyMechanical.com. If you want it done right, Foley Mechanical or FoleyMechanical.com. Tell Dan that I sent you. Joining me right now is Ben Standig, our Washington Commanders team insider, media insider. Ben did not go to Madrid. There was certainly a time in which we were both discussing going to Madrid. I think we made the right call. Before we get to football stuff, you have, started to look ahead a bit, including, some mock draft conversation. But before that, something that I have not actually talked about, which was a story yesterday. I think Max had it in one of his updates, but the team did select HKS, the architectural firm that designed, U.S. Bank in Minnesota, SoFi, AT&T, as its architect to lead design the $3.8 billion new stadium project at RFK. Do you have any sense as to whether or not it's on time? And then with respect to what the stadium will eventually look like, roofed, retractable, etc. What do we know specifically about the new stadium that'll open sometime, I think, in 2030?
Yeah, as far as we know, the 2030 timeline is still a go. Obviously, as has been the case with this whole project, every day, any day something could change because of the, especially with the federal government aspect. But as far as we know, it's going forward 2030. It shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, they started to, bring down RFK and all that stuff. Dome, or actually, they're calling it roofed. So maybe
what is the difference? I've noticed that language. What's the difference between roofed and domed? It's just that it's not inflatable, or what?
Yeah, I think I'm guessing here, like when we think of a dome, right, we think of like an Astrodome or something where like the sky is blotted out. Like it's just a cover on top. I think the roofed part suggests that like there will be some sort of, I don't know if I'm using the right word, like translucent, like you can see out whether even if it doesn't open. So I think that's the deal.
Natural sunlight, etc.
Yeah. My sense is that it's not going to be retractable. Again, that could change, but that's an extra, umpteen millions of dollars onto the project, and it feels like we're just in basic, hearing them talk about this over time, that's maybe where they draw the line on this. Obviously that would be pretty cool, especially, on good weather days, or if you're there for the summer to go see whatever, concert X, Y, or Z or whatever. But it seems like that's going to be the case. Like 65,000 feels like it's the number they're aiming at. And then, as far as the architecture firm goes, obviously, the three stadiums you just mentioned are, pretty iconic stadiums. I've been to them all. We're going back to Minnesota this year for the first time in a long time. And that's like the one stadium I've been legitimately excited to go back and see, having liked it as much as I did back then. And it feels like they do a pretty good job of making it connect to the area that they're in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of things that we all complained about with now Northwest Stadium. And I think the basic one for me was it was just generic, right? There was nothing special to it, nothing interesting to it. Nats Park kind of has the same concerns, Camden Yards is so iconic because, they took something that was already there and just made it a focal point of the whole thing, and it just looks so great. So it feels like here the obvious connection is, the DC government, not the government, but the building, the Capitol, the White House, whatever. So something to connote that would be my guess. I don't know how you do that for an entire stadium, but some aspect of it, I imagine, is going to give you some kind of feel for that area. So I think it's all, look, obviously this is all pretty
Can you
exciting.
end up with a view of the Capitol and the monument?
Well, I think that's the goal. I think one of the concerns is the sun, where the sun comes in, and how you work that. That was one of the, I think, issues at Nats Park to some degree. But yeah, I think that's obviously the goal, right? I mean, it's, one of the appealing aspects of RFK is that it's just straight shot down, to see the Capitol and all that. So I think that's the goal. Whether they can get there, how they can get there, we'll have to see.
When do you think Jaden Daniels will be healthy enough to play? Do you have a sense of that or not?
Obviously Dan Quinn told us we'll get an update after the bye week. That he didn't go on IR suggests maybe that's good news in terms of him coming back quickly. I'm sort of taking it as they're giving it a couple of weeks for the injury to heal, to rest, what have you, and then they'll see where he's at then and make some more formal decision. I mean, there's no real rush. Obviously, the injuries keep piling up. They already have 6 people ruled out for Sunday, which means that if they don't elevate anybody from the practice squad, they'll actually have to have one player who's not playing on the active roster, essentially. So that we're at that stage.
Well, hold on. Say that again. There's a possibility that they won't have the full allotment of players that'll take the field that can actually play.
Well, I imagine they'll elevate somebody from the practice squad because, that's what they've been doing and they need bodies. And why wouldn't you if you have the free opportunity? But I'm just saying right now they ruled out 6 players today. You only have to make 5 inactive if you don't do anything with the practice squad. So, technically if they don't do anything, they would have one player who they would have one short. They'd be one short, one player active. But again, I imagine they're going to have somebody elevated. My point is just to say that for the most part, they haven't needed the extra spot, so they can kind of leave Jaden there. But we are reaching a point if with 6 guys out at the moment that who knows where this goes. But I imagine I don't know, man. I feel like my basic stance at this stage is if he is able to come back with 4 weeks to go, and the last 4 games are all the NFC East opponents, there's something there to be said for get him back on the field. If he's cleared, not playing through something, but if he's just flat out cleared, and get him on the field, let him get some positivity going. And the 4 games are against the division teams. There's a competitive element there that's just different than just simply saying go out and play. But if it's down to he can come back with 1 or 2 games to go, I don't know. At that point, to me, it's well, I don't know if that juice is worth a squeeze. If there's enough runway there to really show much of anything. But so to me, 4 weeks out is kind of the interesting point. And until Quinn gives us an update and says where he's at, I'm not convinced that just because he didn't go on IR means he's definitely coming back.
Talking to Ben Standig, our insider at Ben Standig on X on Twitter. He writes a Substack column on this football team. He put together a mock draft already. Why not at 3-7? And he's got a podcast called Last Man Standing. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. I'll ask you the question that I asked callers in the first hour of the show, and that is, in this season that some might describe as a lost season, 10 games into it, pull a positive or two from it.
Look, I guess I would say looking ahead, I know it doesn't always feel like the offensive line is like this like sort of, dominant group the way maybe you would hope it would be. But obviously, that's been a work in progress. You only got Sam Cosmi back a few games ago, and Josh Connerly is working through just, the rookie ups and downs. But that's like the one group when you look ahead to the draft, like wouldn't think that they need to make a high push to add offensive line, because they should have a feel for who they have, whether that's re-signing Chris Paul left guard or reinserting Brandon Coleman in that spot. So, Laramie Tunsil has had a very good year. Tyler Biotish, continues to be one of the better, a good center in this league. I think the Chris Paul situation has been really promising. And, if with the progress Connerly is making, again, there's still ups and downs, but, you can see the progress. I think that's something you can get excited about, because to me, an offensive line is always, other than the quarterback, it's probably the most essential part, certainly for an offense, and maybe even for a whole team because of the connection to the quarterback. So it feels like that's a group that they could build around, and that's a great start. It'd be a lot worse, I think, if they had some better skilled players, but the offensive line was in shambles. So I think that is something. But other than that, I don't know, man.
That was mine too, and that's sort of what got me into thinking about doing this segment. Is I think that the offensive line is a real positive. I mean, the Tunsil deal is a 10 out of 10 in hindsight. Now they're going to have to pay him in this upcoming offseason. We'll have a lot of conversations about that. Chris Paul ended up in there based on performance, not because of injury. I'm with you on Biotish. He is a top third of the league center, somewhere in that area. Cosmi is an outstanding guard. They've only had him for a few weeks. And Connerly Jr. is a first-round pick. We'll see. But they've got maybe some depth, too, with a guy like Coleman. They've got to, add more depth. But, yeah, I mean, what was the two priorities when the season ended last year was you've got to improve defensively for sure, and you got to get bigger in the trenches. And they got bigger and better in the trenches on offense. And it looks like it's, barring that group being decimated by injuries next year, it looks like a group that you can take into the 2026 season and feel pretty good about.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was asked by the other day, like, how far away do I think that this team is from getting back to, contender status? Is it a one-off season away or whatnot? I think with the offense, if they make the right calls, I don't think it's that far away. I mean, first off, the offense has been, even like last week, right?
Yeah.
Despite missing all the pieces, the offense was competitive. I mean, I don't know if it would have been enough, to win most games, but they would at least be in the game. It's just, they're so far behind, and Mariota, he's just not the guy you want to be trailing behind to bring you a big comeback. But all that said, if the line is intact, can they add to the running back room? Sure, but if you tell me that this is sort of the group, you add maybe a veteran somewhere, okay. And then the receiver, if that's an area that they use, maybe even in the first round, but you add a speed threat somewhere. It doesn't seem like it's that far away from being, pretty good, somewhere to last year. Again, it's all dependent on Jaden.
Of course.
The defense is where there's a lot more you got to have to work with. I mean, even if you say, well, Dorrance Armstrong will be back. All right, but he's coming off an ACL, and Dorrance Armstrong isn't, I don't know, we're comparing him to Dexter Manley and Charles Mann.
No, we're not. But he was a really good player, and they've missed him, dearly. They've missed him, Wise, and even the three defensive ends. I've said this for the last 2 weeks, and I forget if we've talked about it, but I want to know what you think. So now that we're 10 weeks into the season, we know why they are, along with the Bengals, the two worst defenses in the NFL. it's injuries number one. That's the biggest slice of the pie. But for me, overall, that's the reason they're 3-7 more than anything else. But as I think about the defense, it's like if it had been healthy, what would it have been? It wouldn't have been a great defense. It would have been, though, much better up front. They would have been better against the run with a healthy Armstrong and a healthy Wise and even maybe a healthy John Baptiste. Although Jacob Martin, I think, would have perhaps worked his way into the rotation anyway. And just that alone would have been a difference from where they are now. I still don't think it would have been a great defense, and we would have still been left at the end of this season with they've got to improve the defense. But Armstrong and Wise were massive injuries to this defense in terms of what it looks like now versus what it looked like earlier in the year.
Yeah, look, I think like in general with the injuries, again, if people want to say it's an excuse, I mean, rock on, but there have been so many.
Yeah.
But what the injuries did was expose the lack of depth, and the lack of depth is something that takes time to fix. That again, we know what the roster they inherited and so on and so on. But they're talking the defensive line this offseason was, we got to get bigger. That's our plan for the edge. And they bring in Dietrich Wise, a huge guy. He's going to give you be more formidable there. I see that. But he was like a one of one. Like they didn't once he got hurt. I remember immediately thinking, oh, well, that they have to abandon that plan. Like there is nobody else on this roster right now who gives you that physical dimension other than like sure you can put the tackles out there, but that's making them less effective playing a different role. And then Dorrance Armstrong was like the one guy that they had who was bringing you a pass rush, and it's just completely fallen off. So those two guys were incredibly indispensable. And you're right though. I mean, they were there, and it would have been good enough to maybe get this team out of being bottom 5 defense in the league. Maybe now it's like top 20, something like that, which is still not great, but if the offense does something akin to what it did last year, that's not a bad place to be, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, obviously the injuries have crushed them. And that's the thing is like as bad as it's been the last few weeks, that was with Daron Payne and with Trey Amos for the most part. Now those guys are both out. I think if you look at the positives, like I want to say Trey Amos as a positive, other than the fact that we would have said the same thing about Mikey Sanderson last year, and then that's kind of disappeared a bit this year. So I'm a little hesitant to just pencil Trey Amos in, even though those look pretty good. So I mean the defense. I mean this week, my God, somehow they have less personnel than they did, and that's just the thing. All these injuries have just exposed the lack of depth. There's a lack of upside because of the older guys, et cetera. So,
I'm not sure any team, especially when the quarterback's been involved, could overcome this. I mean, the 49ers, people are pointing to this year when I talk about the reasons, not excuses. But the 49ers had what Washington had last year with a much better overall team, and they went 6-11. This is not something that basically, 9 out of 10 NFL teams can overcome. It just isn't. Not this rate. And as you pointed out, and I saw the work you did, I ended up doing it on my own, and then I saw yours after the fact. We had slightly different numbers, but whatever. It's the issue that it happened to their best players. That's the real a part about this year that has really hurt the most is their best players, their highest level contributors are the ones that have gotten hurt.
Yeah. I mean, look, on offense, you're out your starting quarterback. You're at the guy that started the year as your top running back. You're at your number one wide receiver. You're at your other starting outside receiver. You're at your leading your leader in sacks. Now it just continues to snowball from there. You're down your 2 outside cornerbacks, et cetera. So yeah, I mean it's just crazy. The funniest part about this on some level is that Zach Ertz and Bobby Wagner, they keep playing.
The cries, I get this all the time from people. Well, that's what you get for having the oldest team in the league, except that the older players have been the ones that have stayed healthy. They've been the healthy players. Nick Bellore and Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz. Agreed.
Oh, Laramie Tunsil too. I mean, he's in the over 30 club. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, just to sort of spin this back to like what's the positive. I think for me at this stage, look, the season feels like it's lost, barring some miraculous turnaround here. So in terms of going forward, I need to see these two draft classes under Adam Peters step up. And, this week, without Deron Payne, Johnny Newton's going to get a chance to play. Last week, he played 40% of the snaps because of that Deron Payne getting ejected. It's the first time all year he's played at least 40% of the snaps. Last year, he averaged 50% of the snaps. So, he plays, but he's just not getting the run. And, he still has the opportunity to do some things. He's playing a decent amount. But now he gets to play more. And I think, to me, that's what I need to see down the stretch. Him, we'll see if Jordan McGee and Ben Sinnott, ironically, they're both questionable for this game. I think McGee's playing. I don't know what Sinnott's deal is exactly. But, the younger guys need to go. Flat out, end of story for me. And, if that means at some point you have to sit Wagner and Ertz to let those other guys play more, I don't see how you have another choice, because the only way this season, to me, doesn't look like a complete disaster if it keeps going this way is if at the end of the year we don't know if any of these draft picks beyond Jaden Daniels are legitimately starters on this team. And right now, I don't know how many guys you could say fit that expectation.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Quinn actually singled out Johnny Newton earlier in this week. They made him a team captain for Sunday, so they're seeing something that maybe we're not seeing. I think there are plays in which I'm like, I noticed Johnny Newton, but they've noticed some development in a positive direction, right? That's pretty much what he said this week.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I brought it up to Joe Witt a week or two ago about Newton, because you look at some of the snap counts, and some games he's getting fewer snaps than Sheldon Day and Eddie Goldman, and that just doesn't make any logical sense from a bigger picture angle. And like you said, there are times Johnny Newton just made that play there. I see him getting through the line or what have you. But, it needs to happen more often. And look, the reality is if Deron Payne is, if he's not back next year, if he's a salary cap casualty, then Johnny Newton, he's got to step up. But is he ready to? He's not the biggest guy out there for a defensive tackle. That's one of the concerns, I think.
Right.
But again, it's not just about him, although he was, the highest of the second round picks last year. But all these guys,
maybe the one they were most excited about, other than Jaden too. I'll just throw that in. Don't you remember how excited they were? They didn't think he was going to fall to them, and he did.
Yeah, and also it wasn't in terms of 2024. That was not a need. You still had Deron Payne and John Allen. So the fact that
we knew at that point Allen was gone.
Sure, but I'm saying just in terms of last year alone, they and they still had some other pieces around. So like I said, I think Newton can help. I think he could be a guy, but there's a difference between being a contributor and being a flat out starter and understanding what this team has going forward. And, they got to shake something up here. And, Dan Quinn calling plays. I mean, obviously we're all curious to see what that does, but got to get these guys out there on the field for the future. And, they can keep telling me all they want about, we're not thinking about that. We're playing for the moment. And okay, that's fine for this game, but you get past the bye week and you don't win this game. To me, that's got to be the focus.
Ben did a mock draft. You can check it out. Last Man Standing, Substack. It's got Washington taking a very interesting player, but I'll have people try to sign up with you at Substack and catch your first mock draft. Ben's a multi-time mock draft champion, as most of you know. All right, do they win Sunday, and if so, how?
Well, I was going to say, by the way, if you're into the mock drafts at all, root for these quarterbacks in college who play better down the stretch. Because if you want Washington to be able to trade back and teams trading up, and right now nobody seems to like these quarterbacks almost at all. So that's a problem.
Right.
Even though a lot of teams need them. I don't know, man. I think again, I've been saying for the last few weeks, the only way Washington wins if the other team stumbles. Of course, in this case, this is the first game now in a while where the other team is not a Super Bowl contender. So Miami's been playing better lately, though. They've won 2 out of 3. Their defense has been improved. And, say whatever you want about Tua. He's a decent quarterback. It's just he's massively overvalued for the salary. He can get the ball to some of their guys, and they have two speed threats in Jalen Waddle at receiver and Devin A-Chain at running back, who are just frightening in terms of their speed.
Yeah.
And obviously with the way Washington has been, I'm petrified about those two guys. The question to me is Miami coming off the Buffalo game, do they take their foot off the gas, feeling pretty good about themselves? I'm going to guess they don't, because, they just fired their GM recently. I think they recognize that Mike McDaniel is to some degree on the hot seat. And if they, want him to stay, they finish strong. Winning 2 out of 3 suggests that they're doing that. So I'm going to say that Miami's weapons on offense are just too much for Washington right now. Again, no Deron Payne, no Trey Amos. So something along the lines of 31-24 Miami. Maybe Dan Quinn changes more than I imagine, but again, I can't base anything positive on Washington off of what we've seen the last few weeks.
Thanks. Talk to you next week. I'll talk to you Monday. Appreciate it.
Awesome, man. See ya. We'll
go around the NFL when we come back. Big Sunday in the league. 3 massive games. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
The biggest plays and clutch moments.
Oh, look out! Touchdown! A miracle!
It's time to go around the NFL.
All right, let's go around the NFL. First things first, though, football talk all here on the Team 980 is presented by Paramount Plus. You can't count on much these days. You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. Watch your local NFL game live every Sunday, all season long. Visit ParamountPlus.com/NFL to get started. Today, we will kick things off with a little NFC South showdown between the Panthers and Falcons, two teams that have found themselves up and down this year, most notably for Atlanta in that back-and-forth game with the Colts. On the other side, Carolina coming off a letdown loss to Tyler Shuck and the Saints, where the offense just couldn't get anything going. Kickoff 1 p.m. Head referee Clay Martin. Falcons -3.5, over under 42.5. No way the Panthers win this one by 30 like last time, right, Kevin?
I don't think so. There's some stuff going on in Atlanta with Penix Jr. He was this week in his press conference asked about the kind of support he gets during, some of the difficult games. He had a bad game in their loss on Sunday to Indianapolis. They had a chance to win that game. He was not very good at all in that game. He just kept missing one throw after another. I like Penix Jr. It's still early. It's like all these guys, especially at that position. But he's really struggled, and they have weapons. That's the thing. They've got a decent offensive line. Drake London was back. He's been awesome, and he's not playing well. And he said that his support comes from his girlfriend when he gets home, as if to say he doesn't get much support from the coaching staff or even other quarterbacks, i.e. Kirk Cousins. Now, there's been a lot written about how Cousins has been a terrific mentor to him, but that's what he said this week. So people felt really sorry for him this week in Atlanta that, my God, Penix is out there by himself. It's an organization, the Falcons are right now, in a bit of a free fall. They've lost 4 games in a row. Everybody in Atlanta wants Raheem Morris out. They have misreported injuries over and over again for the last 2 years, going back to last year at quarterback, this year at quarterback, at running back, at wide receiver. They cut Ray McLeod, one of their better players. Raheem Morris is done. That's my guess. I can't imagine that Raheem Morris is back. Meantime, Carolina, what can you say? They're hanging in there. They're a 5-5 football team, in a division that's still borderline gettable. They finish in their last 3 games, Bucks, Seahawks, Bucks. Here's where Carolina is really good, in the trenches. They're legit good in the trenches. And Rico Dowdle has become a legit number 1 running back in the league. I kind of like Carolina.
Wow.
Something's off with Atlanta right now.
For sure.
They're imploding for sure. I don't know if Raheem makes it the whole season.
Ooh.
We'll see.
See, we shall. All right.
Well, what's next?
Yeah, we'll go to the next one. We got a big game between 2 6-3 teams. Also looking to bounce back off losses. The Tampa Bay Bucks travel up to Highmark Stadium, take on Buffalo, take on the Bills, who got embarrassed by Miami last week. Good news for Bucks fans. Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving have both begun practicing, but we'll see what that means come Sunday afternoon. Kickoff 1 p.m. Head referee Alex Moore. Bills -5.5, over under 47.5. Which team advances to 7-3 and which team falls to 6-4, Kev?
Still no Bucky Irving, right?
Yeah,
Still no Mike Evans.
I don't think he's going to play. Mike Evans, I think, is done for the year. Godwin might be back at some point soon, but we'll see.
Last night before the Patriots Jets game, I read something that the Patriots really wanted Chris Godwin more than they wanted Stephon Diggs.
And he signed for a pay cut. They were going to give him more
to stay in Tampa.
Yeah, they were going to give him more to go to New England, but he liked Tampa.
What a blessing for the Patriots, because Diggs still has that incredible separation ability. This is one of those big games Sunday. 6-3, 6-3. Both teams reeling a little bit. I know Buffalo beat Kansas City, but you can't get beat by Miami 30-13. They were never really in that game. It was 16-0 pretty quickly. Buffalo's got some issues defensively. Tampa gave up some explosives last week against Drake May and the Patriots. That was the big test, and they passed it last week. New England did against a Todd Bowles defense. I think this number is a bit, kind of begging you to play Buffalo and lay the points. I almost gave Tampa out as a play this week. I think this is a really good football game between two desperate, hence dangerous teams that comes down to a field goal either way. Big games for both of these teams. Look, if Buffalo loses this game, they're kind of really now in deep, deep trouble in the division. Deep, deep trouble. Because their schedule is brutal and New England's isn't. They still have to play a really good defensive team in Houston. They got to go on the road and play Pittsburgh. They still play the Eagles. And they've got to play that New England game in December in Foxborough. You look at the Bills and the Chiefs, I think they both are kind of in, have to win mode. Not must win mode, but really need to get this one mode. And they both have very difficult opponents. This should be a hell of a football game Sunday in Western New York. What's next?
Next up, we got the Chargers headed east for a matchup against Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. After a strong start, who've come back down to earth a little bit. They're 1-3 since they beat the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. But the Chargers, despite their injuries, are putting together a solid resume. Their latest win coming over to the AFC North leading Steelers. Kickoff 1 p.m. Head referee Craig Rolstad, Chargers -3, over-unders 43.5. Quick stat here, Justin Herbert is in the Bo Nix and Joe Flacco tier when it comes to interceptions, throwing 8 so far this year. And he's taking on a Jags defense with 12 interceptions so far. So you think the Jags can turn Justin Herbert over and get a win here?
I think this is one of the reasons the number's so short and why I gave Jacksonville out as a smell test pick. Justin Herbert's been hit a league high 134 times. He's been sacked the third most times in the league this year. They lost Rashawn Slater before the season started, and they've been without Joe Alt for a significant part of the season. We witnessed what it looked like without Slater and without Alt. Our defense pressured and hit Herbert a bunch in that game. And, Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker, Jacksonville has the players to get after Herbert, and this is how they win the game, and they end up turning him over. I think this is a game in which Jacksonville's defense has a legit shot to turn him over, to sack him, to get the ball back a bunch. But hell, the Chargers defense has been outstanding recently. We saw, how good it was in our game at times, early in the game. And then, that was probably the most impressive. And by the way, the healthiest, with the exception, right, of Terry not playing, but Debo was, outstanding in that Chargers game. Jaden was unbelievable in that game after the first 2 drives. They had a running game going with Krosky Merritt, even though he fumbled. They had, it was their moment this year. It got them to 3-2. And that Chargers defense, since that Washington game, has been outstanding. So I could see, 19-16 in this game, something like that. What do you got next?
Next up, we head out to US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis, where the Vikings welcome Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, another team that's producing a plethora of turnovers. The Bears have 2 guys with 4 interceptions, and they lead the league in turnover margin with a +14 on the Vikings side, coming off a loss to the Ravens, where J.J. McCarthy completed less than 50% of his passes versus a secondary that has been really shaky so far this year. Kickoff 1 p.m. Head referee Brad Rogers. The Vikings favored by, I believe, 1.5, over under 37.5. 2 mastermind head coaches in this one. Kev, who you got coming out ahead?
This game's interesting. I think, can Caleb Williams with his legs pull it off against a Brian Flores defense? It's one thing to do it against Cincinnati. It's another thing to do it against the Giants on the road at US Bank. Can he pull it off, with his legs? That's what he's done the last 2 weeks. He's made some good throws too. The touchdown pass to Loveland against Cincinnati that won the game. I think where the Bears have a chance is that J.J. McCarthy is one of the least accurate passers in the league right now. Caleb Williams isn't super accurate either. Add to that, he got injured again. He injured his right hand. It's bruised. He's going to play. They've kind of downplayed the significance of the injury, but there's another. McCarthy hasn't been able to stay healthy in his first 2 years. I still think Minnesota can run the football and score a little bit. Chicago's not great defensively. Big game, in the NFC North. If the Vikings want to get themselves back into it, they have to win this game. And if Chicago wants to be considered a legitimate threat, they're 6-3 with a negative point differential, which is often very, very telling about a team. I think Chicago's fraudulent. I do. I don't think they're going to be, an NFC North contender down the stretch. They play Minnesota, they play Pittsburgh, Philly, Green Bay, the next four. They still have Green Bay, the 49ers, and Lions left at the end of the year. So I kind of like Minnesota in this game. Go ahead. Next.
Out to East Rutherford, where we go to take where the Giants play host to the Green Bay Packers. No Jackson Dart or Brian Dable in this one for the Giants, both due to very different reasons, but I digress. Jameis Winston will finally see the field for the Giants. Meanwhile, the Packers coming off that Monday Night Football loss to the Eagles, but hey, what a total disaster. Defense looked great. Kickoff 1 p.m. Scott Novak, the head referee for this one. Packers favored by a touchdown, over under 42.5. Can the Giants take advantage of the fired head coaching bump, or do the Packers get their offense right?
You always get that bump, the week after a coach gets fired. I mean, you're talking about a team in Green Bay that has scored 13 points and 7 points in their last two games. They also scored earlier this year 10 points in a game. The Giants are capable defensively. They have not played that way in recent weeks. They had the Broncos dead to right, played great defense for 3.5 quarters. Had beaten Philadelphia, remember, Thursday Night Football, played okay against the Niners. The Bears basically was a Caleb Williams, running show where, he ran for 70 yards or whatever it was with the big runs in the fourth quarter. I don't feel great about Green Bay's offense right now, so anything's possible. They're great defensively. I don't think there's any doubt about how good Green Bay is on defense. But I don't like this game one way or the other. What is it? It's 7.5, right?
7.
Yeah. I could easily see the Giants keeping this close. Look at what the Packers have been recently.
Been up and down.
And Jameis, man, good thing for the Packers. Jameis will throw them a few in this game. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you'll see some beautiful dots to Darius Slayton, won't you?
Yeah, you will.
All right. Next up, AFC North bout between the Steelers and the Bengals. Bengals come into this one well rested off a bye week, but probably safe to say a bad taste in their mouth after what happened to the Chicago Bears 2 weeks ago. Steelers enter off of a loss to the Chargers, where their offense just couldn't find a rrhythm. But if there's a defense to get right against, boy, it's this one.
Yeah,
1 p.m. Sorry, Bill Vinovich, ref. Steelers minus 5.5, over on 49.5. What do you got, Kev?
Yeah, look, the Steelers played offensively their worst game of the year against a very good and playing very well defensive football team for sure. Rodgers, by far and away, his most off night of the season. They were struggling for sure. The last time they played the Bengals was that Thursday night game, 33-31. I came in the next day and I'm like, you want to watch two, veteran quarterbacks play the game at the highest level from a cerebral standpoint. That was Rodgers against Flacco that night. Now, Pittsburgh's defense wasn't very good at that point, and Cincinnati's defense was terrible. Pittsburgh has to win this game. They've lost 3 of their last 4, including that Thursday nighter to Cincinnati. The Bengals probably feel like if they can get a win and they get Burrow back in a couple of weeks, they can get back into this thing as well. I like Pittsburgh at home to get back on Cincinnati, but I think this will be a very, very tight game. But the Bengals are just so awful defensively. This will be night and day for Aaron Rodgers and Pittsburgh's offense from what they faced against the Chargers. Look for, 28 plus. They could give up 27 in this game, but I think the Steelers come out on top. I don't like the game one way or another from a betting standpoint.
All right, last one of the 1 o'clock slate, AFC showdown between the Texans and the Titans. Titans coming off a bye, but I do not expect that to matter. I expect this one to look like a JV offense taking on a varsity defense, but I have certainly been shocked before. Kickoff, like I said, 1 p.m. Sean Hockley, head ref for this one. Texas -6, over under 37.5. No way the Titans were in that smell test, and I don't think they were.
Actually, they were close to it, to be honest with you. A lot of action on Houston. Is Mills starting, or is CJ Stroud
So
starting?
CJ Stroud is confirmed to be out.
He's
so
out,
Davis
so it'll
Mills
be
will
Mills
in.
again.
Yep.
Mills, was awfully feisty at the end. He wasn't very good through most of it. Yeah, this is a must-win spot for the Texans to get back to 500. Then hopefully they get Stroud back, and they're going to be potentially in the mix for like a 7 seed. I think I've talked about this. They still have their 2 games against the Colts left, and another with the Jags. Or no, the game the other day was their second with the Jags, and they pulled it off with Mills at quarterback. I like Houston to win, yeah, but maybe not cover. All right, we'll get to the late games and we'll predict.
Let's do it.
Washington, Miami when we come back.
All right, let's fly through these. Rams Seahawks. What do you got, Kev?
I mean, this is setting up to be the game of the year, or certainly one of them in the NFC. It's not a highlighted game. It's in that 4:05 window on Fox because it's a CBS doubleheader. The league didn't think the beginning of the year this was going to be it, but this is, this is two quarterbacks playing at a high level with ridiculous weapons. Jackson Smith-Njigba leads the NFL in receiving yards. Of course, on the other side, it's Nakua, it's Devontae Adams. It is a massive game, and, it could ultimately determine, their matchups, the 1 seed in the NFC playoffs when we get there. I'm going to go with quarterback and coach. Not that I don't like Mike McDonald, and I think he's excellent, and that staff is doing a phenomenal job. I read something real quickly about this game. Do you know that they are one of the most effective teams over the last 10 years in the NFL at stopping the run while playing nickel defense?
Wow.
They're allowing 3.2 yards per carry in nickel against 12 and 13 personnel. 1 back, 2 tight ends, 1 back, 3 tight ends. That's crazy. We saw how good Seattle was, but they are so good on defense, and the Rams are as well. I mean, we have so much 4 o'clock action going on. This should be a hell of a game. I'll go with the Rams at home to win a very tight game.
All right. Well, you mentioned quarterback and coach into this next one. Kansas City taking on Denver. Big matchup of the AFC West. You still taking that quarterback and coach, Kev?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, right now, Bo Nix is struggling.
Yeah, he is.
Denver's so good defensively. We talked about it DVOA-wise. They're number 2 behind Houston in the league. I think this is kind of like a must game for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if they lose this
8-2.
game, they're 5-5, and Denver's 9-2.
Yeah.
That would be, a 4.5 game lead with 1 in hand. I think the Chiefs win this game somehow. I bet it's a close game. It'll be an interesting game to watch the Chiefs' offense against this Denver defense, especially, in a home game. I don't know anything about the weather out there for that one. That could be a factor. Lastly, what do you got? Lions, Eagles?
2 top teams in the NFC, Lions, Eagles. What do you got, Kev?
Man, what a matchup, right? What a matchup of just personnel and packages and the whole thing. We know Detroit wants to get after you. We know Detroit plays a lot of man coverage, so this could be this could be the day potentially for an A.J. Brown breakout. I don't have a feel for this game. I think Detroit's a better overall team, but it's Philly at home on Sunday night. They just showed you what they're made of on Monday night. Maybe the short week hurts them. Detroit basically had a bye week last week, in Landover.
Yeah.
I don't have a pick for the game. I won't wimp out. I'll take Detroit. I'll say Detroit wins it. No, I'll take Philly. I like Philly to win the game.
All right.
Philly to win the game.
Lions are getting 2.5, so I'm going to take the Lions in that one. All right.
Philly wins field goal in overtime.
Perfect.
All right. Our Washington and Miami predictions. I gave Washington out. They're a major anti-public side. There's sharp money on Washington, believe it or not. Why? I have no idea. I'll go Miami wins this game on a Riley Patterson field goal from 54 yards out at the gun in the first ever game in Spain, 29-28. Washington gets the cover, but I honestly, from an analytical standpoint, I have a hard time seeing how they're going to stop Miami on defense.
Yeah, I'm going to go 27-24 Miami 27-24 Washington wins. Chris Rodriguez gets, let's call it 60 plus and a touchdown with the running back by committee. 60 yards is going to be a lot for him.
60.
60 is going to be a lot with the running back by committee, man.
60 yards rushing.
I know.
Yeah.
But I do think that they're just going to try and pound the rock and punch Miami in the face, and hopefully it works out. But hey, man.
Would not surprise me if the Dolphins have 150 plus yards rushing.
Not at all. No, HN gets the outside. It's not going to be able to contain.
All right. Is Doc in?
Linnell Willingham is coming up next.
All right. Linnell's up next. Stay tuned for that. I'm back on Monday. We'll have plenty of time. We'll have all day to digest the results of a Sunday morning game, East Coast time. Back on Monday, boys.